Billy Jenkins had walked the same gravel path to his barn for more than 40 years, but on that September morning, something felt wrong before he even touched the door. The sun had barely risen over the Missouri hills, lighting the ranch in soft gold, and the cool air smelled of drying hay. Everything should have felt peaceful. Instead, Billy froze with his hand on the latch, staring at the barn like it had whispered his name. He heard movement inside. Not the quiet rustling of mice or the flap of a swallow's wings. This was heavier. Slow shifting weight. Hooves scraping the concrete floor. But all 4 of his horses were outside in the paddock. He had put them out himself the night before. His heart started pounding. He pushed the door open slowly, ready for anything. But nothing could have prepared him for the sight waiting at the far end of the barn. A horse stood in the last stall. A thin bay mare, whose coat was dull and lifeless, ribs showing through her sides, head hanging low as if the simple act of standing took effort. Billy had seen neglected horses before, but this wasn't just neglect. This mare looked worn down by life itself. He stepped forward, confused, scanning the barn for signs of a break-in, but everything else was untouched. No tools missing, no gates broken, no tracks, except one set he didn't recognize. His eyes moved back to the mare, but something else caught his attention. A piece of paper was taped to the stall door, fluttering in the cool breeze from the open doorway. For a moment, Billy just stared at it, afraid of what it might say. When he finally reached for the note, his hands shook. The handwriting was messy, rushed, and full of desperation. As he read, the words hit him harder than any blow he'd ever taken. Dear Mr. Jenkins, her name is Ruby. She's 12 years old. She loves carrots more than anything in the world, and she's scared of storms. She will nudge your pocket if she thinks you have treats. She saved my daughter's life once when she was a filly. My daughter is grown now. She lives in California. I'm dying. Liver cancer. They gave me 2 weeks, maybe 3. Billy felt his throat close. The words blurred. The truth in that letter was too heavy to take in all at once. The writer went on to explain how she had tried everything to find Ruby a home. How no one wanted an old mare. How rescues were full. How she had no family left, no money left, no strength left. I've been watching you for weeks, the letter continued. I see how you are with your horses. I see how they look at you. Happy, safe. That's all I want for her. If you're reading this, I'm probably already gone. Please don't send her to auction. Please don't let her be alone. She's been my best friend for 12 years. At the bottom was one last line. Please just love her. Billy's knees weakened, and he sat down on an overturned bucket, the note shaking in his hands. He had lived through tornadoes, droughts, market crashes, and the death of close friends. But this was something different. This was a stranger trusting him with the only thing she had left in the world. When he finally stood again, Ruby lifted her tired head. Her eyes were dull but gentle, holding a sadness so deep it went straight to Billy's heart. She didn't flinch when he opened the stall door. She didn't shy away when he stepped inside. Hey there, girl, he whispered, barely able to get the words out. You're safe now. I promise. Ruby leaned her head against his chest, and Billy felt everything inside him break and put itself back together at the same time. He stroked her neck carefully, feeling every bone beneath her skin. Old scars crossed her shoulders and haunches. Her hooves were cracked and overgrown. She looked like a horse who had given every last piece of herself to someone she loved, and that someone had loved her back enough to move heaven and earth, even in her final days, to make sure Ruby wouldn't die scared and alone. Billy swallowed hard. You're staying, he murmured, whatever it takes. He spent the next hour giving her small handfuls of hay, fresh water, and gentle care. He found the envelope under the feed bin, exactly where the letter said it would be. Inside were 10 worn $20 bills, the last money a dying woman had. By the time the sun was fully up, Billy was on the phone with Dr. Ellen Carter, the vet who had cared for his animals for nearly 20 years. Someone left a horse in my barn overnight, Billy said. A mare. She's in bad shape, Ellen, real bad. Her voice sharpened. I'll be there in an hour. When she arrived, one look at Ruby told her everything she needed to know. The exam was long and quiet. Billy watched every moment, hands clenched, praying he hadn't found Ruby too late. Finally, Ellen pulled off her gloves, her expression serious. "She's very malnourished," she said. "Worms, ulcers, rain rot, old injuries. Her hooves are a mess, but with time and proper care she can recover." Billy didn't hesitate. "Tell me what she needs." Ellen paused, her voice softer now. "It will take months, and it won't be cheap." "I don't care," Billy said. "She stays." Ruby watched them with tired eyes, unaware that her life had just taken a turn she never could have imagined, and Billy had no idea that taking her in would pull his entire community into a journey that would change all their lives. Dr. Ellen Carter stayed for another hour, walking Billy through every detail Ruby would need to survive. The feeding schedule alone made Billy's head spin. Small meals every few hours, day and night, to avoid overwhelming her frail system. Medication for ulcers. Treatments for her skin. Dewormer. Hoof care. And all of it had to be done with patience, care, and absolute consistency. When Ellen finally packed her bag and headed to her truck, she paused in the doorway and looked back at Billy. "You know," she said softly, "most men your age wouldn't take this on." Billy glanced toward the barn where Ruby was resting. "Most men your age forget what matters," he replied. He didn't realize how true those words were until the first night. At 1 a.m., his alarm went off. Billy dragged himself out of bed, joints aching, made his way to the kitchen, and soaked hay pellets in warm water. By the time he reached the barn, the cold bit into his bones. Ruby lifted her head when he came in, her eyes following him with silent trust. "Yeah, girl," he whispered. "I'm here." He fed her slowly, letting her chew at her own pace. When she finished, he brushed her neck, careful to avoid the patchy spots of rain rot. When he finally checked his watch, it was nearly 2:30 a.m. And in another few hours, he'd have to do it all again. By the third night, his wife Betty found him in the kitchen, staring bleary-eyed at the counter as he stirred another soaked feed mixture. "Billy," she said, tying her robe tighter around her waist, "you're going to collapse." "Ruby won't make it without these night feedings," he replied. "I know that," Betty said gently, "which is why I set my alarm too. We're doing this together." From then on, they alternated nights. It didn't make the work easy, but it made it possible. And slowly, day by day, Ruby changed. The first change was in her eyes. The dull emptiness began to lift, replaced by cautious curiosity. She began to nicker when she saw Billy approach with her meals. She lifted her head when Betty spoke softly to her. She took her first carrot after 3 days, chewing it gently, looking almost confused by the treat. But the moment that broke Billy open completely happened on the 7th morning. He reached into his pocket to grab his phone. Ruby stepped forward and nudged his pocket with her nose, searching for treats, just as the note had said she would. Billy froze, then laughed, then cried, all in one breath. He grabbed a carrot from his other pocket and held it out. "There you are," he whispered. "There's my girl." Word of the mysterious horse spread through the small town of Buffalo faster than wildfire. People knew Billy, knew he wasn't a man who exaggerated stories. So when he told his neighbor, James Coleman, about the note left behind, James insisted on seeing Ruby himself. James stood in the barn aisle, his weathered hat in his hands, staring at Ruby with a mix of anger and sadness. "She's been through hell," he said. "No horse deserves this." "Her owner was dying," Billy said quietly. "She tried every option she had." Quote. James nodded slowly. "Yeah, sometimes people run out of road before they run out of love." Later that week, Billy shared Ruby's story at the local community center meeting. He didn't expect much. Folks there were usually focused on feed prices, weather patterns, and cattle market updates. But something happened in that room. One man stood and said he'd found 2 starving horses tied to his fence years ago. No note, no goodbye, just desperation. A young horse trainer shared how someone dumped a lame gelding on the roadside near him. The horse had to be put down. Another woman described finding a pony tied to a park bench with a sign saying, "Free to good home." Story after story came out, each one sadder than the last. The truth settled heavy in the room. People weren't abandoning horses out of cruelty. They were abandoning them out of hopelessness. "We have a problem," James said, standing. "A big one." "What do we do?" someone asked. A woman named Virginia rose to her feet. "We help each other," she said. "We build a network, a safety net. If someone in our county is struggling to care for their horse, they call us. We pitch in. Hay, vet care, labor, feed, whatever we can spare." "We barely get by ourselves," another person said. "Exactly," Virginia replied, "which is why no one should face it alone." Billy felt his heart swell. The room was changing. He could feel it. Something new was forming, something built out of shared struggle and compassion. He stood slowly. "Ruby gained 23 pounds in 2 weeks," he said. "Not because of money. Because people cared. My vet gave a discount. A neighbor brought hay. The feed store donated supplements. My wife gets up every night to help me feed her. I didn't do this alone. None of us have to." Silence settled, thick and heavy. James lifted his chin. "All in favor of starting the Dallas County Horse Safety Net, say aye." Quote, the answer came back strong, unanimous, a room full of people who had seen too much hardship to ignore one more cry for help. And just like that, something powerful was born. Over the next weeks, Ruby kept improving. Her coat grew shinier, her steps steadier. Her personality bloomed. She became a nosy mare who wanted to watch everything. If Billy brushed another horse first, she squealed in protest until he came to her next. But as Ruby healed, something else was gathering momentum. A wave of community support unlike anything Billy had seen in his lifetime. And soon, Ruby's story would lead them all somewhere none of them expected. 3 months passed, and Ruby transformed before everyone's eyes. Her coat turned rich and glossy. Her ribs faded beneath healthy weight. Her eyes, once sunken and tired, now shone with a spark Billy hadn't seen in a long time. She trotted in the paddock. She squealed at feeding time. She nudged his pockets every morning, demanding her carrots. Billy documented her progress with photos, lining them up on the kitchen table one evening. Betty stood behind him, her hand resting softly on his shoulder. "She looks like a different horse," she said. "She looks like a horse who remembers what love feels like," Billy replied. The Dallas County Horse Safety Net was growing too. They helped an elderly man get enough hay to survive winter. They arranged vet care for a single mother's injured pony. They found safe boarding for a couple who'd lost their farm and were trying to hide their horse in a friend's pasture at night. But despite all the good happening around him, Billy kept thinking about the woman from the letter. The one who'd brought Ruby to him in her final days. The one who had trusted a stranger to keep her beloved mare safe. Some part of him felt unfinished, like he needed to know who she was. Needed to understand the full story. That answer came in mid-December. The phone rang, and when Billy answered, he heard Virginia Price speaking in a voice tight with emotion. "Billy, sit down," she said. "I found her." Billy gripped the edge of the counter. "You found who?" "The woman who left Ruby, at least her name, her story." Billy closed his eyes. "Tell me." Virginia explained how her daughter, who worked at a hospice center, had been sorting old files. She found a record for a woman named Dorothy Ann Sawyer, age 71, died of liver cancer on September 15th, 2 days after Ruby had appeared in Billy's barn. Dorothy had spoken about a horse in her final days, a mare she worried about constantly. The hospice staff assumed it was confusion from the medication, but Virginia's daughter remembered the story of Ruby and looked into the address. It was a small house on Route 38, 1 mile from Billy's ranch. The house sat empty now, but the horse trailer still sat in the driveway, and a small paddock stood behind the house. The truth hit Billy so hard he had to sit down. "She hitched that trailer by herself," he whispered. "Sick, dying. She loaded Ruby alone and drove her to my barn because she didn't have anyone else." "That's not all," Virginia said softly. The staff said Dorothy refused to be admitted until the last moment. She kept saying she had something she had to take care of first. Billy's voice cracked. "Ruby." She meant Ruby. That night he walked to the barn in the cold winter wind. Ruby stood in her stall, healthier than ever, ears pricking forward as he approached. "Your mama loved you something fierce," he whispered, brushing her neck. "She gave everything she had to save you." Ruby nudged his pocket for her carrot. Billy laughed through tears and gave her two. But that wasn't the end of Dorothy's story. A week later, Billy learned that Dorothy's property was being put up for auction. Unpaid taxes, no next of kin, no one to claim it. "How much?" Billy asked Virginia. She told him the number. It wasn't small, but it wasn't impossible either. Billy thought of the note. The $200 Dorothy left. The lengths she went to. The love she carried to her last breath. "I want to buy it," he said. "And I want to turn it into a recovery place for horses like Ruby. Horses with nowhere else to go. I'm calling it Dorothy's Place." The county thought it was a good idea. The community thought it was a miracle. James organized a fundraiser at the VFW Hall. People donated quilts, cattle, tools, baked goods. They raised $8,000 in one night. A construction company offered free labor to fix the barn. The feed store donated fencing materials. The bank approved a manageable loan. Then, 3 days before the auction, Billy received a call from a lawyer in California. "Mr. Jenkins, I represent Ms. Samantha Sawyer Blake." Billy's heart stumbled. "Who is she?" "Dorothy's daughter." Billy nearly dropped the phone. The lawyer explained the family estrangement, the guilt, the regret. Samantha had learned what her mother did, learned about Ruby, learned about the note. "She wants to help," the lawyer said. "She's wiring $50,000 to help you purchase the property and establish the recovery facility. There is only one condition. She wants it named Dorothy's Place. And she wants a plaque telling Ruby's story. She believes people need to know that it is okay to ask for help." "Done," Billy said without hesitation. By January, Dorothy's Place opened its gates. The house became an office. The barn was repaired and turned into recovery stalls. Fences were replaced. A bronze plaque stood at the entrance, honoring Dorothy and her impossible act of love. And Ruby? She became the first official resident, though she still slept every night in Billy's barn, the place where her new life had begun. Through winter and early spring, Dorothy's Place took in horses who were too thin, too scared, too forgotten. Horses who had lost their families. Horses whose families had lost everything. Horses who needed time and love to remember the world could be kind. And then, one warm April afternoon, a rental car pulled into the driveway. Billy was checking on a new arrival when he heard footsteps. A woman stood in the barn aisle, her hands trembling, her eyes red. She had Dorothy's eyes. "You must be Samantha," Billy said softly. She nodded. "I had to come. I had to see what my mother left behind." "Would you like to meet Ruby?" Tears filled Samantha's eyes instantly. "Please." They walked to Billy's barn together. When Ruby saw them, she lifted her head and ambled toward the stall door. Ruby sniffed the air, then let out a soft, questioning whinny. Samantha stepped forward. "Hey, girl," she whispered. "It's been a long time." Ruby pressed her forehead gently into Samantha's hand. "She remembers," Samantha cried. "Oh, God, she remembers me." For 2 hours, Samantha brushed Ruby, talked to her, fed her carrots. Before leaving, she wrote another check for $50,000. "Keep saving horses," she told him. "Every horse you save is a way of honoring what my mother did." Billy watched her drive away, feeling the weight of something sacred settle over the ranch. Ruby's arrival had changed everything. One woman's desperate act of love had created a network that saved over 40 horses in 1 year. The Dallas County Horse Safety Net had grown across 5 counties. Families found support. Horses found safety. People learned that asking for help wasn't failure. It was courage. Every dawn, Billy still walked to his barn. And every dawn, Ruby met him with a nudge, searching his pockets for carrots. But on quiet mornings, when the Missouri hills glowed gold in the rising light, Billy would pause, rest his hand on Ruby's neck, and whispered toward the sky. "She's safe, Dorothy. Your girl is safe. And because of you, so many others are too." Quote. Ruby would nicker impatiently, and Billy would laugh, wiping his eyes. Because love, even desperate love, always finds a way.